So hi everyone. We will be getting started very shortly, but I just wanted to make a quick announcement because there were a couple of roles that we sent out this week. I want to say it was about four of them. Um, and yeah, I think they were about four of them, if I'm not mistaken. So please, if you're interested in the roles, please make sure that you apply to them. If you have any questions about them, feel free to reach out to me and ask me about them. There's one role in particular, the Rite Aid role. The person who referred the job to us is an actual alumni who graduated last year. His name is Michael. I included his full name in the email in the document with all of the job postings. He notified myself and Vivian that if you are interested in applying, that you can feel free to reach out to him and he'll be able to answer like any questions that you may have about the role. But make sure that you do follow up with him and either CC or BCC my hiring at NYC Data Science. .com so that we can just keep track of who's applying to the roles and follow up on you guys' behalf. But again, feel free to reach out to him if you have any questions as well in the roles. But there were quite a few roles that came out this week. So please make sure that you apply. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Next Friday is our last alumni session because then it's Christmas and then it's New Year's. So next Friday will be our last one for the year. We're trying to figure out exactly what we're going to do to wrap up the year. I can't believe it's December already. I hate the cold, but it is what it is. It's fine. So we'll follow up with you guys on that. Today, I will follow up with this meeting with the list of presentations from Zach's series that he did that concluded the last month. We are going to resume those next year, but we're still trying to figure out the process of that. So I will send out his series that he did in the email, the different job openings as well. I'll include the surveys as well because we do have a cohort that is graduating as well, so that they have all that information. Also, too, if anyone's available, we are having our Christmas party. I think it's the 21st of December. So if you are in New York City and if you can visit, I will be in office that day so I can see everyone. And I actually leave the state later on the end of this month. I mean, the 23rd. So I actually, my schedule and our schedule with the office, a lot of us will be off. So try to get to us if you can, Slack us, email us if you have any questions or need help with anything, feel free to reach out to us. So yeah, that is also coming up. And I think that's all the announcements that I have. So if you guys, since I am going to pass the whole thing to Zayu, if you have any questions, feel free to Slack me, email me, but definitely make sure that you're applying to those roles and following up with me or the hiring email with your resume so that I can send it to the hiring managers. Any questions, concerns? Awesome. So I'm going to pass it over. Make sure you guys have the document available because I know you guys are going to need it for today's presentation. And the floor is yours.
Hey, thank you, Courtney. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the coding challenge session today. So I asked Courtney to send out the data set and the problem statement on Wednesday, so you guys have some time to, just start reviewing the data set and also get to know what we're going to talk about today. And hopefully, maybe one or two of you guys already have some code ready there. So maybe we get a chance to review a code during today's session, but I have a hard cutoff at 3 because for people who graduate from the Ideal Bootcamp, Friday afternoon, 3 o'clock is our project presentation time. So I have to leave around 2:58, something like that. So, but anyway, I try to get as much as I can during the about 15 minutes. So let me share my screen first. So I believe this is the the notebook I sent to you guys, or at least I asked Courtney to share with you guys. So this is a um, patient churn data set. So again, the reason why I asked you to just try a little bit, and I mentioned today's session will be not about reviewing your code, or let's just talk about the thinking process, because this is more important than giving the interviewer the most, like, say, accurate model. They wouldn't expect to come up with a really good model, just within 24, 48 hours. That's just unrealistic, like expectation. But at least you need to show them their thinking process and their coding style, so they know if you have the full data set or the more data, and maybe more like you have access to a remote server, more powerful, like computation resources. You can try some crazy stuff, but at least you need to show them like the workflow is correct, and the way you tackle the problem makes sense. That's why I want people to, at least see the data set first, and then, we probably just gonna be brainstorm, even though I do have some, some code there, but that wouldn't be the main focus of today. But I want kind of just brainstorm and, talk about how you're gonna work on this, coding challenge or data challenge if you were given, something like this. All right, so this is a patient churn data, and you can think about like a customer churn, in a like a retail, in a sales company. They need a kind of machine learning model like this to kind of like those like subscription come like Hulu, Netflix, right? So those companies, they want to make sure that the customer get the most value of the subscription, and also like um, getting more subscription fees, premium subscription, etc. So these are the things they care about most. So this is like to me, when you receive the student receive the coding challenge, and I help her a little bit review it. I feel like this is a very good coding challenge. So because first of all, this is a very generic topic. Like I mentioned, the customer churn data is very popular in almost all industries. As long as you are selling something, you probably need a similar model like this. So looking at the data is patient churn data. So basically means it means like when a patient or beneficiary leaves a health plan. Definitely it's more related with healthcare data, etc. So there are multiple reasons why a patient may exit a plan. So that's the thing they want to know from the data set. So here are some of the features of the data given by the company. You have the ID, which is the identifier, unique identifier of a patient. You have sex, female or male, birth year, death year, if applicable. Assignments that flag is something I'm not really sure about, but to me it's just like a flag number, either 1 or 2. And the count of primary care service seems to be like a continuous variable. We just record the number of primary care visits. And also these are the things. So this kind of like you can already imagine this kind of our X train, right? But definitely we need to do some pre-processing, and also like definitely we don't want to include ID in our training data. And we have our response Y value, which is like the reason why people churned, and this data is recorded in 2015. And pay attention to this number, because it's something actually we might be able to cover, or we might be able to talk about into this lecture. Sorry, not this lecture, but in today's session. So these are like some of the reasons: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different reasons. And it's kind of like when people churned, the company gonna classify put people into one of these 6 groups, 6 categories. And what we're looking for, so build a predict model to predict the reason for churn. So kind of a predict one of these 6 reasons, sounds to be the case, and choose the error measure to assess the predictive accuracy. So, so to us, seems like they want us to pay extra attention to kind of like how to accurately measure the the performance of the model. Seems like I think in general, when you see something like this is like kind of multi-class classification problem. And if you see something like this, it probably means that this is like imbalanced data set. So general accuracy wouldn't be a good fit. Because just one category is taking the majority of the let's say response Y. So that's something we might need to explore a little bit. And then they will ask you what's the predictive accuracy, the one you defined of the model, and is it fair to include all of these variables, or are there any variables that you would eliminate? So it seems like is it fair to include all these variables? So it gives you a hint that they are afraid there might be some it's like a feature selection step, but also like that is a fair to include all these variables. So it seems like they're worried about some like maybe data leakage issue, like if one of the features or one of the columns is a strong indicator or almost like has a direct relationship, that will give you the answer right away. So you don't really need a machine learning model. Don't even need to train a machine learning model. You can literally just derive the response Y based on some values. So that's kind of like data leakage issue there. And are there any variable you like to eliminate? So they want to, confirm that. And of course, they want to know what are the significant variables for predicting if a patient will churn, and are they different based on the different churn reasons? So that's a lot of things, but definitely these are like meaningful, and they're useful for the different departments of the company. Let's assume this is like a healthcare company to make a decision. Depending on the behavior, not too much of behavior, but because you only have like the gender, their birth year, count of primary care service. They only have like very few, features here, but based on these, they want you to know like if we can predict whether the customer will churn or not, and are they different based on different churn reasons. So kind of like like a follow-up questions. I think this is something I think is really good coding challenge and data set. And if you look at it already, it is pretty clean. So I think this could serve as a good example, give you some kind of experience working with customer churn data set, and most likely this will be a imbalanced data set. So and it's very common in real life. Like most people, let's say say you want to predict whether the customer is going to return the order. Most people don't return. A few people return, right? So it's kind of imbalance there. You also have like a let's say if the like if the customer gonna let's say add the item to shopping cart, so that's also something could be predicted, right? So because for example, like you have like Amazon account or even other shopping websites, if you add something to your account and to a shopping cart, and then you left, so most likely you will get a email reminder about it, right? So those are the things I think. So it's very similar, right? So it's like a like a more like a binary classification problem to predict whether the customer going to do something or not. So yeah, I think hopefully I already give you some like introduction to this data set. If it's the first time you see this data, you didn't get a chance to review the data set yet, so hopefully you get to know what the data is about. So here, it's just some very standard code. I believe I shared this with you guys already. I just realized to go let you know where the data is and like take a look at the data. So our data frame. So you have the ID column, You have the gender column 1 or 2, male versus female, birth year, death year. If applicable, you could see a lot of missing values there, and assignment staff flight based on the instruction here. Enrolled by primary care or specialist. It seems like most people are enrolled by primary care, and count of primary care services. So just a continuous number is a count, right? Like a frequency count. And then you have all the different reasons for churn. So you have 6 different reasons. So it's basically like a one hot encoded. Assuming you have a column called reason. So this is just like kind of a one hot encoded, right? So it could be, if all 0, that's just a no churn, right? If there's 1 0 here, that means this customer churn because at least 1 month in Medicare health plan. So that's just how the data is structured. I don't think I can run again because I think I already manipulate the data unless because I did some feature engineering stuff, so you'll look differently, but at least this is what does the original data set look like. So I think I'm gonna pause a little bit for now, and I'm gonna ask just any students here, have you got any chance to maybe just do some EDA so we can look at screen if you're feeling comfortable with it, and let's just explore the data a little bit, and then we talk about how should we answer these 3 questions. Does anyone get a chance to look through the data? Because like I mentioned, if I can definitely look through this example solution, but it wouldn't be that helpful because you kind of just attending another lecture. If no one did this, it's also fine. We can just do it. I give you guys some time. We can do this together during the session. But hopefully, maybe 1 or 2 of you guys already did some homework. Again, the code doesn't have to be clean, and I already saw hallway unmute. Or maybe you unmute in the first place. No one? I really don't want to go through that example solution just like a lecture, because that wouldn't do any it just a lot of things you have to just try it, otherwise you wouldn't really notice that this is the thing you're going to encounter and how do you solve that, because a lot of things you have to test the code first, and then you see what might be the issues like coming up.
I wouldn't say I got that far. I'm not an actual alumni yet. We're still working on the last project, but I started going through it today. Mm-hmm. And the only thing I really got to, and it's like what you're saying about data leakage, I tried to create another column just called churned. Mm-hmm. So if any of those other features were 1, it was 1, and then 0 if not. So then I tried to do like a logistic regression against those. I mean, I can share. I didn't get really far.
Definitely. Yeah, I will stop sharing.
But it's like what you're saying. There's definitely data leakage somewhere, and I hadn't got into it yet because it's just saying it's predicting 1. So
yeah, let's take a look.
Like it's 100%. So that's not really good at all.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, let's take a look.
And that's really as far as I got.
Churned. And what did you use for the data?
This is the
original data, and
and then I used all of these columns, not ID. I used sex through these reasons as the X, and then for Y I used that new column I made, which was I added all these together. But sometimes it was greater than 1. Sometimes there was more than 1 reason, I guess, which is kind of strange.
You mean some of the kids have more than 1 reason?
Yeah, because I had to reset it, like
Mhm.
to say 1 if it's greater than 0, else 0. Because the unique values for the churned one that I came up with was like 0 through 3, which is kind of strange, right? I don't know
Mhm.
why there would be more than one reason
More than one reason.
for leaving, but all I did was sum those uh, columns,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like
Gotcha.
add all of these reasons for churn together, and if it's 1, then they churned. If it's 0, they didn't. But yeah, I did have to adjust and
Mm.
say um, that if it was greater than 0, 1, else 0.
Mm. Gotcha. Okay, so definitely you mentioned actually I didn't notice that you mentioned some of them like have like more than one reason. That's something I think you definitely that's a good finding, and you want to communicate with the interviewer, something you want to email them back, and actually all the coding challenges I saw so far that do have some sort of confusion there. Um,
Mm-hmm.
no matter what type of problem it is. So it's always a good practice just to email them back some question, even though you already know the answer, but just to show the thinking process and also like kind of communication skills, etc. But I think people care about like, oh, you don't just give a task and doesn't ask any questions, and definitely you can make some assumptions there, but it's always a good practice to communicate a little bit, and like even if you already know the answer. Still just to put them an email and ask for confirmation. For example, like you mentioned, some of the patient that have more than one reason for churn, that's possible. But from what we read from the instruction, there shouldn't be any overlapping reason, right? So this
Yeah.
seems to be kind of like standard. So that because I didn't use this way to come up with the churn column, so that's
Mm-hmm.
why I didn't notice that. But I think that's a good finding, and maybe in that case we can what you mentioned is like greater than 1, right? So you just filter out, separate them from the whole data set, right? Just to study that group, see what happens. So you might see like, okay, so if something is equal to some column equal to 1, the other column also equal to 1, they have like a 1-1 relationship, something like that, a 1-to-1 relationship. So there might be some like data entry error. Oh, that's always the case. That was not indicated in the instruction part.
That
So
might be.
yeah, and but then let's go. I think that part I think should be something that we can either fix. And we either just ask confirmation from interviewer. But let's talk about the stop sharing. But let's talk
Oh, I
about
didn't know
the
if you were going on
issue.
something else. Sorry.
No, no, sorry. So the data leakage issue you mentioned here was just because you didn't remove because uh, the trend column was derived from all the 6 different columns, right? So it's kind of like
Yeah.
it's not that hard to kind of like um, the 6 reason columns or 6 different categories are kind of the most dominant features predicting the reason column, and it must give you a 100% accuracy. So if you already have the trend column, just make sure you remove the other 6 columns. Okay, so the trend
In what
column.
sense? Because I only used the Y was only that last column and the X was those ones before it. So how would you remove it? What do you mean by that?
Remove the 6 reasons columns from your X. So kind of a 1 to
Ah, okay. Okay.
7, maybe. I think 1 to probably 1 to 6. I have to confirm that, but
Just use through the primary care services and not the,
exactly.
okay.
Okay, so the thing is like the trend column was actually derived. You have that formula already,
Yeah. So it's
but
the
yeah, so that's
got
kind
it.
of causing leakage. But that wasn't the leakage that I
It's like the
mentioned.
dummy trap part kind of thing.
Kind of like you already know the answer with
Yeah.
these 6 columns. So that's
Okay.
the thing.
Thank you.
Actually, as mentioned, those things you only know that when after you finish something, you have to code it up, and then you know that, oh, something's wrong, and then you go back and check what went wrong. So thanks, David. Anyone else want to share the code?
So I don't have much code because I started on this right now, but I think what I would do is I would make a division between people who churned because they died and people who churned for other reasons, because to me that's kind of um, a fundamentally different reason for a customer leaving.
Mm-hmm. Great point. Thanks, man. So yeah, definitely. So one of the churn reason was which one? Yeah. So a death date prior to the start of the benchmark year. That's correct. So so it seems like it's kind of like obvious, right? If someone died, then they will be kind of like stop the health plan, etc. So yeah, that makes sense. So it's kind of like this thing, this at least this category isn't that you don't really have to predict, right? So and yes, so that's a great point. Definitely, yeah. Okay, great. So that's something I think definitely we want to pay attention to, and I think we can. I just really run the codes because I sometimes if you run the code once and then you go back, the data frame just looks completely different. So I see a chat. Okay, cool. All right, good. So all right, so let's just explore the data set a little bit together. So again, this is by no means the final notebook you want to send to the interviewer, but it's something that at least serve as a good draft. Actually, haven't even finished the notebook yet, but I think because I haven't really drawn any solid conclusion. Because again, something it's important to show the workflow there, but they didn't really ask you to train the most accurate model, because otherwise it just makes their team looks bad. So you train more accurate model than the whole team within 24 48 hours. That's just mission impossible. So let's take a look at data first. So definitely I would like to see missing values, because from machine learning project here, or maybe a capstone project, you might notice some low missing values. You have to deal with how to impute them, which is also counted as part of feature engineering. So from this output, it looks like it seems to be pretty clean. The only column that has missing value is the death year, which makes sense, right? So so it's super clean data. That's great news. So we don't have to impute a lot of them, and sometimes even though you impute using mean, medium, mode, still it's like missing information. So you like to avoid that as much as possible. All right, so then let's take a look at some of the features, all the columns that we're gonna send into our model. So for example, like the gender column is male versus female. I didn't really rename it, but you can look from the instruction. 1 means male, 2 means female, and it seems like we have more female patients in this data set, but the difference is not that significant. So it's like 50,000 versus 70,000, still pretty balanced here. And then we group by the death year. Let me just try to rerun everything. So you can see here we have this is death year, right? So 2013, 2014, 2015 till 2018. So it seems that this is up till 2018. However, if you read the instruction here, the reasons are when they label the churn reason, it's up till 2015. So that gives you a hint that maybe for people who died in after 2015, they're not labeled yet. For example, this column had a date of death prior to the start of benchmark year. So the benchmark year is basically 2015, right? So even though people died after 2015, but still this is benchmarked as 2015. So these people, they're not being categorized as trend yet. So that's something you want to pay extra attention to. So I think maybe a reasonable assumption would be also label these as churned. I think that's probably fine. But again, that's something you can definitely ask the interviewer. So because the data is only till like 2015, and we know that these guys will also be labeled eventually. It's just a matter of like, should we label it now, or you don't want to kind of like if you use 2015 as the as the benchmark year, or when you run this model, you shouldn't know anything about 2016, 2017, 2018, right? So it's kind of like what's going to happen in the future, or these people are going to die in the future, which isn't true. So and that caused a dilemma here because on one side, we know they will be labeled as like churned, because eventually they will be labeled as churned. However, we cannot do that because that will cause the distribution of the labels change, and it's going to affect the our model predictions, because we don't know for 2016 to 2018 what are the other patients, what are the the other reasons people churn, right? So we only know for sure that these people will be labeled as churned based on this reason, right? But we don't really know the other reasons. So that's something I think, again, you need to confirm with the interviewer. How do you guys want us to to handle this type of dilemma here? And I don't know the answer either. So there's no like right or wrong answer. It's just a matter of like how should we look at the data, or when should we look at data, pretending like we're at like 2015, or we're like 2018, because the data has up to 2018. Apparently, this like they collect the data, or they dump the data around maybe beginning of 2018, right? So that's why you only have the the death year up till I think it's like in early 2018, based on the average number. All right, so then we look at another feature, which is called this assignment step flag. Most of them are one. The Marion takes like about like 10,000 observations. They have two, which is I think this is the primary care versus specialist. So most people enrolled in this plan from the the primary care. All right, so this is like just a simple exploratory analysis of the some of the features, and I want to see the these columns. I just feel like there's no way I put them in pandas code, so I just want to make a shorter version of it, because otherwise the code gonna look so mathy, and it's really not necessary. So I just put a very simple dictionary to rename the columns. So this one becomes that prior ID message. Just make sure you name it meaningfully, in a meaningful way, and at least 1 month of Part A or Part B coverage, or health coverage already, and 1 month in Medicare health plan. So had Medicare plan, non-resident USA, beneficiary including shared saving initiatives. Has saving. So these just things that is shortcut for the full name, and then we can map all the corresponding values to kind of like just the reason column. So we want to know, because if you pay attention to the problem statement, so this is actually one student sent to me. In the first place, I told her it kind of seems to be a binary classification problem. So you want to group all the churned patients in one group and non-churned in another group. So, but look at the problem statement. So build a predictive model to predict reason for churn. So that gives you a hint that it's not just looking for like a churn versus non-churn. They also want to know what are the kind of like reasons, right? So it's kind of like you want to predict the reason why people churned. So that gives you just a little bit extra, like you want to ask a little bit more instead of just a binary classification problem. Now we want to know why people churned. So you want to know the reason, and that's why what we can do is based on the value of the value of the different reason columns, we can come up with a reason column that tells you gives you a hint like whether it's like no churn or have a churn reason. So we couldn't just group everything as churn because they want to know the reason why people churned. So that becomes a kind of a multi-class classification problem. And then we apply this function to the data frame. And then we can take a look at our reasons column. So here's the result. Again, this one matches what we, just our expectation, because like I mentioned, most of the type of problem is an imbalanced data set, right? So you don't really have that many people churn, because otherwise, just means the business isn't working. So so you can see no churn has like about 110,000, right? And so it's kind of like the majority of the group. And then you look at the other reasons. So this non-resident USA only has like 5. And to me, if a category only has like 5 observations, that probably means you wouldn't be able to have that much predictive power for that specific category. It's because there's just not enough information for models. Even if you consider you have to do a train test split, so it's kind of like you have 4 observations for training. If you do it 80-20% split, right? You have 4 observations for training and 1 observation for testing, and that just doesn't make sense. So so when you see something like this, and it's pretty common if you have multi-class classification problem, there's definitely going to be some minorities. So these two seem to be at the same scale, like your 5,000 or 600,000 versus 9,000. So kind of at the same scale, but this one, these 3 seem to be off a little bit. So that's why the next step what we like to do is group the categories or the reasons with the least observations as just one group. That's called other. So so with like this is about like 250 observations. So with 250 observations, still it's like compared to the other categories, it's not that much, but still it will give you a little bit more confidence that we might be able to predict this whole group, these 3 categories as a group. So and you might notice that we actually have like 6 different reasons, right? So if you remember here, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different reasons. But here we only have 5. So it seems like the last category, which is had shared saving, that means including other shared saving initiatives. So this one seems to be empty, but I think David just gave me a heads up that there might be some like observations that have more than 1 reasons. So maybe this has shared saving is overlapping with some other reasons. So the function returned before we get to this part. Yeah, that's something I think, again, you want to confirm with the interviewer. How do we treat them? Like, do we count 1 to both categories, or should we just ignore the one of them? All right, so like I mentioned, there's like a churn. So no churn is like the majority, and then you have kind of 5 different reasons for churns. But you probably want to group the minorities so that the model didn't get that much noise and can focus on just the most part, the bulk part of the data set. So the idea is like just to group the last 3 minority group reasons. And yeah, so just to tweak the code a little bit. So if they fall into one of these categories, which return other, otherwise we return whatever it is. And then we do a value counts again. So you see that now it has like 250 for the other group, and then for the rest of them, they seem to be okay, even though it's still a imbalanced data set. But it looks way much better than what we saw before. And then still the no trend group is the majority. All right, so any questions so far?
Just a general question. Hey, Zayu. I was wondering how long the student had for this take home. How much time?
I think this is part of a longer coding challenge. So I think this one, from my expectation, should be at least 48 hours, 2 or 3 days. Yeah.
Okay. And like, if you started out the analysis and like the other student just mentioned, he noticed some people have more than one reason. And in your analysis, you kind of assumed that there was only one reason.
Oh, no, I didn't notice that because I used a different method. I didn't thought about it because to me, they seem to be exclusive from each other. So I didn't even think about it. But I think, that's a good point. So sometimes, those things you only discover when you do it myself. So
but I also like appreciate that you just you're continuing on with it, because it's probably better to just pick an approach, right? when it's timed, and just to like go with it.
Exactly. So you want to be able to give the really comprehensive. So we're kind of like reverse engineer this, right?
Yeah.
We don't have time to study it, but with a time limit, with a timer, clocking down there, it's really hard to just get a really comprehensive approach. So get something down and show a clear workflow. And again, do not try to run crazy research cost validation on a model. That's just not really expected, because you want to show the workflow, you want to show a thinking process. So that's more important than sending them a code, even though eventually the model is really accurate, but there's no documentation, no highlighting. People don't really know what we're trying to do here, and they will kind of like, okay, I don't know what's going on there, even though the result is really good. So it's buried at the bottom, but no one paid attention to that, right? So just make sure that if sometimes you send a PDF or PowerPoint. Sometimes if you don't have time, you just send them a Jupyter Notebook. But make sure just to style it a little bit so it's easier for people to follow. You can just follow the style of the lectures, right? So you have some some highlights, some use lists when you want to point out something. So those are things I think is really important. It's almost the same as important as your own code. So because otherwise, even if you have really good result, but you don't demonstrate or present properly, it's gonna just be buried there, and no one's gonna notice that. So
yeah, that makes sense. Thanks.
Cool. Of course. All right. So so once we have a better understanding of data set, what we can do is just do a little bit of feature engineering, because we don't really have that much leverage there. There are only 3 or 4 features. So so the first thing I did is HDC column. So this is pretty straightforward. If the depth here is a missing value, I input with 0. Otherwise, it's 1. So this one is pretty straightforward. And then I want to calculate the age of the of the patient. So I further kind of like just impute with a missing value of the death year with 0. So it's either to just calculate the age, and then I apply this function. So if the death year is equal to 0, I return 2018, which is the at least the year we have the data. So at least based on our EDA, this seems to be the case. And then otherwise, just use death year minus birth year as the age, and then we apply this function to the age column. And then we also have the gender and also the assignment step flag. So these two, they already they have already been encoded as 1, 2, I believe. Yeah, both of them are encoded as 1 or 2. However, we can't really use that. There's like a one hot, sorry, not one hot, but like a label encoded. So let's take a look. So you see that you have 1, 2, and for gender column it's also 1, 2, 1, 2. So so it's better to just one hot encode this column, because otherwise it would be taken as like a number 1 or 2. So that also have like kind of like quantitative meaning there, even though this is just a indicator column or categorical column. This is not even ordinal column, because it doesn't necessarily mean that let's say if it's a female patient, you're going to increase the log odds of getting turned by whatever the coefficient is. So it's just not the case. So we have to kind of like one hot encoded, even though it has already been like label encoded in certain ways. So so here we since it's like both column have like only 2 categories, so it's kind of like a binary case. And if you just do get dummies or whatever, you'll get a perfectly negative correlated columns. So like the male column equal to 1, the female column must be equal to 0. So though if there are only 2 categories there, it's better just to keep 1. And you remember in pandas.get dummies function, you have that option like keep first, right? I think drop first. Sorry, I couldn't remember. It's either keep first or drop first. So, but either way, you want to drop, one of the columns, and it's like if it's like a, multi-class, multi-categorical or multi-categories, then you probably also drop the most dominant category, because if it's like dominating that column, so it's kind of for that specific column, it's like if you kind of like I'm sorry, what I'm talking about, okay, so if you don't drop the most dominant category, then for that one hot encoded column, it's more like most of the values in that column is equal to 1, and this is what we usually call a zero variance feature. So it's kind of like, oh, it's the same, almost the same for almost all of the observations. So that just doesn't really help. It's kind of like it doesn't provide any meaningful information, because it's the same for everyone, right? So then we'll get the same model if you just drop that column. So sometimes if, let's say, one category is taking, let's say, 95% of that column, we probably want to drop the mode of the of that column. So in pd.get dummies, it's just I think you can specify that like I can't remember the parameter, but you can definitely specify that when you do get dummies. But here in this case, both columns only have like 2 categories, and we don't really need to call get dummies, because we can just simply do a list comprehension here. So I could do one column male, and then if I do 1, return 1, otherwise return 0. from the the gender column, and then patient churn the primary care. So it's from the assignment step flag. So it's either 1 or 2. If it's 1, I will give it 1. If it's 2, I'll just give it a 0. So eventually, I kind of like not really feature selection, but also just keep the dimension the same for the after the feature engineering step, and we have the patient churn. So I'm sorry, this is like after some simple feature engineering, I'm gonna drop the the unused columns, all the columns that we don't need in our modeling part. So then eventually it's something like this, and then we can take a look after the clean data. Then just take a more sample of it. And so it's kind of like we only have because we derive the age from birth year and death year, so we also drop both of them, and we drop ID for sure, gender for sure, and all the other categories. So I think I didn't do this. Okay. Sorry, I missed that step, and I don't want to do it again. I was like, how come we only have three features? Because I forgot this step, and I cannot do it again because I already dropped these columns. So maybe what I can do is quickly run all the cell above, Okay, so hopefully this will work. Take maybe 30 seconds. All right, so this looks much better. So the reason column is going to be on response Y. So it's like a multi-class classification problem. Well, actually, I'm going to talk about that next because this might not necessarily be a multi-class classification problem, depending on how you interpret the the problem statement. So you have the frequency of the primary care visit. And then remember, these are the dummified columns we derived. And then this is like based on the death year and also the age as well. And then the reason will be, our response Y. And what we can do is just take X and Y from the original data frame. This is something I highly recommend because you might notice that when you start doing modeling, things can get really messy, and sometimes if you you might mess up your X and Y, and if you use the data frame directly to train, and then you mess it up, and then you have to rerun the pre-processing stage. So a couple ways to handle that. So what we can do is once you have X and Y, you can dump it as a pickle file. So you don't have to do all the pre-processing and feature engineering. And the other way, you just save them out of the original data frame, so it becomes X and Y. So if you mess up your X or Y, because you have to do a train test split, etc. So it's really handy. Just rerun this code, so you get the X and Y back from the original data frame. So again, it's something you probably notice if you do a lot of like coding challenge. It's just something that I personally feel really handy. Just name it differently, and because I always mess up my X and Y after doing some kind of like resampling, upsampling, etc. So I want to get back, then I have to just rerun this line of code, and pretty nice and handy. All right, so next we'll talk about modeling, but I think this is part I think I'm gonna leave it to you guys, at least for now. Because we won't be able to finish everything definitely by 3, but I think what I really want is you guys get to know the data set, and then we talk about the problem, and then I want to see your code, and you can email the solution, just Slack me, or you can just email hiring. So Courtney, if you see students, send you code file for review, please just forward to me. So I think it's really, helpful for you guys to just do it by hand and get to know what you need to pay attention to. Because otherwise, if I just go through my code, especially the modeling part, you wouldn't really learn anything. And if I even give you guys the solution, the example solution, you look at it, and if you don't type it out by yourself, again, you wouldn't learn that much. So, but definitely before that you go, I will go through these questions a little bit. So we talk about build a model to predict the reason for churn. So there are a couple ways to interpret it. So there are multiple churn reasons. So what you can do is just isolate or separate the churn data from the whole data set. So it's only a subset for churned patients, and then it becomes, so it's kind of like you create a subset from the original data. So you only focus on the churn data set, right? So it's kind of like even though it's still imbalanced, but it's way much better than if you combine all of them and having just one model predict whether they're going to churn and also the reason for churn, right? So and since they only want to predict the reason why they're going to churn, so I think it's okay to just separate the churned group patients as just one group, and then you can it's just become a multi-class classification problem. However, this is still imbalanced. So how the Medicare plan is like the most dominant reason. So so you need to think about what is the fair metric to use to evaluate the model. So it's kind of like if you're using accuracy, it might not be the best approach, since you have a dominant category here, and that's something can do some research, but it's more related to like something like a weighted accuracy or weighted F1 score. So that's something you're probably going to be looking for. And again, I will leave you guys to do some research, because you're going to do the modeling part by yourself first, and then if you want, you can either Slack me directly, or you can send to Courtney, and she'll forward to me to review it. But this is something you need to do some research by yourself. But like I mentioned, it's more about like instead of using just accuracy, you can use weighted accuracy, which is weighted based on the number of observations each group, or a weighted F1 score that could also work. So that's that. And then for the second one, based on the accuracy, the metrics you choose, what is the accuracy for the model you just trained, and is it fair to include all these variables? So like we talked about, so again, it's something I think you have to clarify with the interviewer. So specifically for this reason, right? So the patient is deceased before the benchmark year. So how should we handle it, right? So maybe we can just exclude this category. That's also possible. Like this category seems to be just you don't really need the model to predict it. Actually, if you train the model, you might notice that for this category, it's always almost 100%, because it's like is disease announced is like a strong indicator. So if you think about like you're doing a random forest, and if you're doing tree split, and you split based on the let's say the death year, or is disease or whatever, and then after that split, so all the observation goes to, let's say, the yes branch, or yeah, just the one branch, or the yes branch will be the same category. So that's kind of like the reason. Actually, if you train the model, you will notice that this category has almost 100% accuracy. So so that's something, again, you probably need to confirm with the interviewer. And the last one, so what are the significant variables for predicting if a patient will churn, and are they different based on different churn reasons? So this one is slightly different, because first of all, if you are only using trend data set for the first question, then you probably need to build another model for this question, because it needs to know whether the model can predict a patient will trend or not, right? And then you have to basically include trend and also non-trend observations in your training sample. However, if you include them, then it will become super imbalanced. So like you have like 110,000. So you probably want to downsample a little bit, downsample the majority, and make them like almost to the same level as maybe this Medicare plan. So it's kind of still imbalanced, but it's way much better than having like a 1 to, I think, like a 1 to 100 ratio. This is just not going to work. So so you definitely want to kind of like downsample the majority in this case. And another thing is, are they different based on different trend reasons? So they want to know the significant variables. So you can think about this as like, maybe you can get the p-value from the regression, or you can get something from the feature importance from the, let's say, tree-based models. So it's kind of like, that's why you probably want to include, both trend and, non-trend data in one kind of like model, because otherwise if you just have like trend versus non-trend, then you wouldn't be able to answer the second question, because they want to know, does the variables change for different trend reasons? Sorry, the significant variable change for different trend reasons. So to answer the second half of the question, you do have to, separate or differentiate the different trend reasons instead of group them as just one category called trend. All right, so I think we talked a lot so far. So any questions, if you plan to do something on, or are we good to go, or you want any further clarification before we end today's session?
I had a little bit of a question about you were talking about the weighted accuracy metrics.
Yeah.
So is there any difference between initializing the random forest, for example, with class weight equals balanced, and then using just accuracy versus specifically giving it balanced accuracy as a metric? I mean, does that not do the same thing?
Good question. So actually, let me show part of the code here. Again, I haven't really finished yet, but so when you actually, I do have it here. So when you train random forest or logistic regression, you have the choice to select balanced subsample, but this is only for like the training process. So what I talk about is like when you run this classification report, it actually gives you the weighted average for the precision recall and the F1 score. So this is about the evaluation process. It takes into account the Y train and predict Y hat, right? And when it calculated the different metrics for each category, it uses the and overall it's going to use the weighted average. So it's kind of like based on the the support here is like the number of observations. So the weighted average is the same. If you have balanced data set, it's the same thing as you just take the mean. If you have imbalanced data set, so the support number is different, then you that will be kind of like you multiply each accuracy with the number of observations in each group, and then you divide it by the total number of observations. So still they're different because the cost weight here is for the training process, and this is for the evaluation.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so I hope you have enough information to get started with. And like I mentioned, the reason why I didn't choose to go through the modeling part is because you have to do it, get your hands dirty, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to to learn anything. So it's the same thing as like we didn't really go through it. So that's why I highly recommend you guys to take the time and do the coding challenge. Again, you can Slack me directly, or you can email Courtney first, and she will forward to me. So I will review it, and then I will send the feedback. All right. Cool.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great weekend. I will send the follow-up email after this. Everyone have a great weekend, and I'll speak to you all soon.
Thank you.